Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Purnima Bihari, who is currently Director of Product and has over 15 years of experience in the tech industry. Purnima is passionate about advancing gender diversity in tech and is at the forefront of advocating for awareness and action against gender bias, which is prevalent in pre-trained large language models, also known as LLM, offering insights and strategies that organizations can adopt to mitigate this bias within the responsible Gen AI framework. With her experience, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Purnima. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered your passion or your niche?
So I discovered my passion very early in life. The three things I discovered I was very passionate about was definitely technology, but finding creative technology ways to disrupt industries. And then the biggest passion I had was ethical product practices, right? Which is very relevant when it comes to AI, Gen AI specifically, as I mentioned, right? So I discovered that I could lead, I could generate new ideas. When I was looking for a career, so I moved from project management to product management. And the biggest reason I did it is because I love creating things from scratch. I love the challenge. I love the chaos. It allows me to indulge in my curiosity. You have to think outside your box and you're introducing completely fresh things into the world, right? And then the other thing that why I'm so heavy on ethics and data, like this is even pre when I came into AI. I used to work in the GRC field. And right now I'm also working with Cloud Security Alliance to define their AI organization responsibilities. So I think I'm going to cover when it comes to mentors also. But what it does is, to me, I love data, okay? Because the main thing about data is it's very non-judgmental, it's very transparent, it doesn't have any bias per se, but the bias comes from the fact when companies start prioritizing profit over, let's say, ethics. And there are recent incidents like which I'm posting about is essentially when we lose that moral compass, we start misusing the data or how we approach it, right? So um, I I was passionate about AI ML because I started my product management role in it. So I did AI when it wasn't like the coolest kid on the block. It was like one of the kids. So I realized that there was a lot of potential in it. I was like, this shapes the future. This is taking the past, enriching the present, and then it's unlocking possibilities. But without an ethical compass, without a data driven way of doing things, we're going to make mistakes which will cost us more, right? Any powerful tool or instrument or framework always has the potential to disrupt negatively things, right? That's why you want to find out the right way to do it. But yeah, for me, it's like technological innovation is not just about, sorry, technological evolution is not about innovation. It's definitely with Gen AI, it's a whole shift in our way of life and doing it like basically navigating this with an ethical compass, navigating it in a way where we can connect all these dots is always going to be a better way to do it.
Appreciate your passion about this area because, especially that ethics and the morale piece, is so critical when you're dealing with sensitive information. And before I dive into that piece, you said you shifted from project management to product management. And that's not always easy to be able to transfer your skills and sell the transferable skills. So, what allowed you to be able to successfully do the pivot?
So for me, I think it was a leader trusting in my ability. It wasn't easy. I tried for a while. I even took a pay cut to get into product management. And obviously, I didn't come from the AI/ML field, right? So I met Dr. Cindy Gordon, who was starting her company called Sales Choice. And when I met her, she saw a lot of potential in me and she entrusted me with the role of head of product. The thing is, I learned a lot of things about AI, not from just a theoretical perspective. I worked with a chief data scientist who had been doing it since like 1990s, right? So I learned it practically. Obviously, I went to theory after that, right? So the lesson I learned during that time, and I've always kept it, like believe in people's potential. Find people who have a burning desire to learn because they learn really fast. Like I became an expert in the field is because I wanted to learn so much about it, right? So it always comes from like, I know it sounds really like, fluffy saying like, oh, it was trust, but It's pretty much trust because everybody has the skill, everybody has the capacity. It's which leader can entrust and say, like, hey, I'm going to give this person a chance. And yeah, now I'm in product management, now I'm in AI. And as you mentioned, you like my newsletter. So that all started from there.
Happy for you that someone took a chance on you, because I think if we look back on our careers, a lot of it has to do with someone taking a chance on us, right? So for you to then pursue a leadership role and adopt that mindset, I think is incredible. And then the second piece of thing, at the rate in which information is changing and the research is changing, you need someone with hunger, right? Because you can't teach someone to be hungry to learn and grow. But if you have that, then they're going to be that person you want on your team, as you have to be able to pivot along the way. So on the flip side of that, what would you say is like, what are the most difficult challenges for someone to break into the tech industry as a product manager, like based on everything that you've seen?
So one, you have to have the mindset of being a product person. I don't think it just comes easy. I think you have to be curious. And curiosity, weirdly, is not as common. It's like ask the right questions. Product is all about asking the right questions. Second, the other challenge would people have is when they come into this industry, when they come into like from fields that are not product, they don't understand collaboration as well. And collaboration is also key to product. Product isn't the one who calls the shots. Product is the one who helps people who call the shots by providing data, insights, trend, market research, right? So being able to connect those dots, having the curiosity to find out what these dots are is absolutely critical. The other challenge people have, and I'm not a big fan of it. A lot of companies set the challenge of like, hey, you have to have domain expertise. I'm like, we weren't born in different domains. I've been through like, I don't know, like 7 domains right now. And that's within 15 years, right? Like I've learned, but I've learned on the job. I spent the first 3 months learning everything about the domain. Recently, I was talking to another product leader, and she's at a much higher position, and she said she likes people. Like I asked him, like, what do you want people to do in the first 30 to 90 days? She's like, I want you to spend time becoming an expert in your domain, in your product, in your market, so that when I talk to you, it doesn't look like you are, so that it doesn't look like you basically just came into it. You basically sound like somebody who's been there for years. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge that people face. Like when if you're going into product, make sure you have a lot of passion for what you're getting into. Second, you have a lot of curiosity. Third, make sure you're asking all the right questions. And also, like, don't be scared of chaos. Chaos is not bad. Chaos is, as Game of Thrones always put it, is chaos is basically the ladder to success. The more chaotic, the faster it is, right? So yeah, those would be my takes from it.
Thank you for sharing your learnings from that. And speaking of the ladder to success, right? You've been able to not only make a pivot, but grow as a leader in that sense. So, what are attributes of leaders that have helped you in your journey? Whether it's like, I would never want to be like that as a leader, or maybe you're like, hey, those are the attributes that I actually want to adopt.
I think it was more, those are the attributes I want to adopt. I was very fortunate with the mentorship that I received. I actually had quite a few good mentors. The first thing that was very like I learned early on from them is they were experts in their domain. They had built that expertise. Second, they were very relentless at mastering their art, whatever they were in. They were in sales. I'm also connected to a lot of small businesses, and it's the relentless pursuit of expertise. The third thing I learned from them is have empathy. When you're in a bad situation, remember somebody else is going to be in that bad situation and take those learnings and make them grow. Because the more people you grow, the more you grow as a leader personally and even professionally, right? And the biggest thing anybody told me was I've been coached literally so I have 3 main mentors, and they all told me the same thing: be authentic, be yourself. It sounds very fluffy, but I didn't realize what it was. And I'm like, what do you mean by I have to be authentic, right? Like, I am myself. They're like, no. They pulled me back when they're like, no, you're trying to fit in. You're trying to be like the person in the box. But you have the potential to be the person who thinks creatively, who thinks completely out of the box, who has a completely different viewpoint of it, right? And that's where it comes in. Like, be authentic. Why? Because that authentic self will bring something to the world that doesn't exist. So yeah, those were some of the big leadership lessons I had early on. And oh yeah, and ethics. All of them were very ethical. I've been in meetings where it was between like, hey, should we make this sale? And my mentor was like, no, we're not making this because we don't provide this service. We're not doing it for revenue. We'll do it right whenever we do it. And that actually ends up making a lot more money and a lot more impact because you're doing it for the right reasons, right? So big principles there.
Oh my gosh, you touch on so much great things. And I think with a common theme that I'm getting from a lot of leaders that I've been chatting with is it takes all kinds to make it work, right? And that also ties into the biases that we find in data, right? If garbage in, garbage out. So from your perspective, you're very passionate about how do we be mindful of the biases in the data that we're inputting or the data around the hiring practices, right? Because you really want to make sure that there is equity in that space. Can you share a little bit more about what your biggest epiphany to date has been based on the research and everything that you're working on?
So the biggest epiphany was all the UNESCO researchers that came out that LLM models had a very high tendency to have Western ideas and had a massive gender and racial bias. Now, we don't think about it, right? We can blame the machines. We can be like, well, we have to regulate. But the thing is, as you said, it's garbage in, garbage out. We haven't been the best form of ourselves. We haven't been the best form of humanity, is why this data is going in, right? So, for example, for hiring practices, for years we've talked about the lack of diversity at the executive layer. How many women are there, right? If I look at the percentage, and the percentage is like, well, 10% are women, 10% of them are in the certain age group. Now, the machine is going to learn, well, that's the pattern of how you decide somebody is going to be successful at a role. Now, that bias goes into our hiring practices because now the machine is like, well, I don't know, but we all know from experience. We all know from experience, it is not where you come from. It is not what you do. Some of our best leaders, some of our best political leaders and industry leaders didn't come from privilege, didn't come from these profiles. They rose to these positions because they broke the norm, right? So it's like, yeah, when you bring in that bias, and that's why I've been advocating, I'm like, LMs are moving so fast that if we don't, like, I get government regulations, right? You did a good job. I don't know if anybody else is doing that. Other countries are way behind on addressing the bias. And even if you look at the EU Act, it doesn't address bias. So the other thing that I've started advocating is we do actually have a tool for it. It's called model cards. Model cards go with every AI model that exists. The problem is a lot of companies don't mandate it. There is no way to version control, even though all the tools exist, by the way. So I'm like, let's think about it. What I'm advocating, and when I even do the AI organizational framework, is let's look at what responsible AI looks like. Is it fairness? Is it equality? Is it impact? And let's build that into the model cards. The model cards that exist right now are very technical. Oh, you can do this. This is the research that went in. This is how it reasons through these situations. Let's also address what do you think is going to be the ethical impact? What do you think is the data distribution in it? Make it transparent. Every time you retrain, get that model like, okay, 30% of my this data was consisted of Hispanic, 34-year-old woman, let's say Asian men of age of 50, 60, like all of this. Let's make sure all of that gets addressed, and let's put a governance structure that people actually verify these model cards. There is a way to automate, right? We are in technology. We are automating everything. Why don't we automate a check on bias? Why don't we make it part of audit checks? It's like, hey, are you doing enough to make sure this works, right? So yeah, that's where it come from.
Lots of golden nuggets there. And my question to that is then whose responsibility is it within an organization? Because, sometimes it's like, I don't have the capacity, so I'm going to play hot potato and then kind of like punt it across. But then from what I've read, it's like it should be everyone's responsibility from top down, right? So, but for you, where does that responsibility start? And how do we continue to make sure that everyone continues to champion that this is at the forefront of the mind?
So one of the things our industry is very obsessed with is the RACI model. I'm recommending the model cards go into the RACI model. Let's have responsibilities because responsibilities takes different forms, right? Who's going to fill it? Who's going to audit it? Who's going to be informed about it? Who's going to take actions on it, right? And I'm also distilling what these roles mean. Like, what is the responsibility of a data scientist? If you see a bias, what are you going to do to address it? If you're a product manager who's going to be putting this product out, what is your responsibility? You're making sure these biases don't exist. A data scientist is also making sure that biases don't exist. What is the executive's responsibility? The executive responsibility here is to set the vision and the benchmark, saying we need to remove of every bias that is possible. Let's look at the impact. One of the big problems I've seen in technology, and this I've noticed, and this becomes very obvious with Gen AI, is people don't understand the external factors. So every time we go to an MBA school, we are taught all these factors, but as soon as we get into a career, we start zeroing in on competitive factors, we start zeroing on market trends. We don't zero in the other factors, which is actually the economic factor. What is the monetary policy? What is the fiscal policy? What happens with human and labor regulations, right? Where does human rights space in? So the more we do that, the more we'll get to a place where we stop misusing this technology, right? Other than that, we don't have any ways to filter it. Whose responsibilities? Responsibilities would be defined by who owns the ethical compass. And to be fair, it is leadership, it is executives who own the ethical compass. As soon as you have leadership and leadership and executives kind of like take it as like, oh, it's an afterthought, I'll only do it for audit purpose, you're kind of going the wrong way already. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the whole concept of how do we be planful versus reactive, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of implications to not keeping this at the forefront of the mind. Human rights is definitely one aspect of it. And for you, how do you prepare leaders to be able to adapt to a lot of the generative AI tools and everything that's coming out? Because there's that perception where it's like, well, I've always done it this way. I'm comfortable that this stuff is changing way too quickly. I don't know how I'm going to be able to adopt it, let alone help my team adopt it. So based on what you've seen, how do you help leaders, again, get more comfortable with the tools that are coming out and at the rate that they're coming out?
I mean, my newsletter was an attempt to do that because I realized people were actually either talking about the technical aspects, and there was the other aspect, which is like, well, this tool released this and that happened and blah, blah. And there's no middle ground of how does this connect? How does strategy connect to the technical side, right? I think more people should do that. I think more people, like, you're right. A lot of people like doing things the way they've done it, and maybe that's okay. Just take in a new variable. This is happening. For example, I did a little bit of analysis on what is the value chain analysis, right, of Gen AI products. Think about it. You're all used to it. We're all used to it. What does it look like? What does competitive intelligence look like in the age of Gen AI? Because now a lot of information that wasn't available is available, and there are a lot of ethical gray grounds there also. What can you get? Are you using your competitors' data? So first, raise your awareness and get your own perspective, right? It is the time for us to stop doing what we've done and start thinking, what can I do fresh? And only leaders can do it, right? I don't expect a new grad coming into the market to have that visibility. But we've been here for 15, 20 years. Come on, like, we need to start thinking at that level. We need to start distilling this information and putting it out, make it public. I don't care if I make anything or whatever. Like, I'm doing it more like, even if it's, let's say, 15 people read it, it's 15 people who will be aware of the risk that happens, right? Like, I wrote about the problem of recursion in financial industry if they use LLM models, right? And that itself is very interesting because there's no awareness on it. A lot of financial organizations are going, the implications are really freaking high. And you're right, there's no responsibility. So for us, like, let's let leaders even be part of initiatives where we can all collect together and put this out, right? So I would say, as leaders, use your experience, distill this information, put it out into the world, raise awareness, and obviously training. There's not a lot of training. There's a lot of material. There's not a lot of training that's available, but go into that continuous learning thing. I'm like, okay, I heard this person say this. How do I distill it? Where can I find more about it? So yeah, that would be my advice.
Curious from your perspective on this part is when it comes to workflows and using a lot of those generative AI tools. Part of like what comes to mind as a use case is I am a consultant going into a company and I need to do like a SWOT analysis to see if this is the right technology or product that I want to implement with them, as an example. I've gathered all the data from them. Now I'm tempted to go to ChatGPT, input all that without the privacy of like their company name, all the like IP stuff, right? Just so I can get a quick first level analysis. Some leaders are very hesitant on doing that because they're like, where's the data going? Who has access to it? What's going to happen? Like, are there any implications on the company that I'm working with? But others are like, if that saves you 3 hours initially as a first layer analysis, by all means do it. What are your thoughts on this specific use case?
So I would say I'm on the side of use the technology, because the thing is, it does use publicly available data. But basically, like, competitive, I would say is like the area you can use it for. It's not bad for it at all, actually, especially with all the new versions of LLMs that are coming out. You will get a like it does, like, personally for me, it shortens my time for research by a lot. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, thing that used to take me days and weeks, that takes me like a couple of hours now, and I'm okay with it, right? Because, as I said, the problem isn't on that side. The problem is the implication. So don't stop focusing on what my strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, the other thing I would recommend is, I know I've seen a lot of companies hire internally without knowing what their strategy is. I would kind of say, I don't know if you want to go there. Get people who know the space, who have done this as overseers and not as employees, because as soon as people become employees, they kind of don't have the same power as much as like a third party that comes in and advises you on it. Don't go for expensive ones either. Go for people who are in the field, who are showing a lot of trend, who are showing a lot of understanding of this trend, and assess it from there. The biggest thing that the SWOT analysis is totally misses out, and that's going to totally not work for Gen AI, is computational cost. Yes, you think this is going to give you an advantage, but the one thing that you're not going to know is, how much is it going to cost me, right? So when you're doing the SWOT analysis, don't leave it independent, make it a part of a business case. And the business case should be based on the actual cost of bringing the solution to the market, right? And you want them to know how, and it's expensive. It's not freaking cheap. I think a lot of companies are not understanding. It's not chat gpt. Chat gpt is the easier version. It does a few things and it's more conversational. As soon as you put it in your application, you have to look at the cost of regulation, you have to look at the cost of maintenance. Your development cycles are fast next, so you're not going to be making quarter by quarter predictions. You'll pretty much be, you can have a budget that can overshoot every month, right? So that's the kind of understanding we need to have, right? Like, focus on the computational aspect. SWOT and competitive, yes, it's competitive. If my competitor is doing, like, it's a big hype market, and hype market, everybody's doing it. For every company, it's one, stick to your core, and second, see if it it has the right ROI for you, right? You still have to stick to your core. You still have to realize, why did we build this company and what are we going to do? And your whole competitive thing is not, oh, this new fancy thing will get people. No, people don't care what you use in the back. People care what difference you make in their life. So it's still stick to the course, but yeah, look at it more from a financial perspective.
Really great call out. And speaking from the financial perspective, I know if you have disconnect between your product owner, your project manager, your data scientist, your sales rep, right? Like the different departments that kind of bring this final product to market, you end up costing the client a lot, right? Because one might overpromise something, but the other is like, I can't deliver on that. So from your experience, what would you say is keep this one thing in mind if you're going to step into a role that wants to bring cohesion and collaboration amongst everyone, so that you're not costing the client an arm and a leg and a lot of dissatisfaction because you overpromised here and underdelivered here?
So I believe in cross-functional teams designed around every product launch, using frameworks which are go-to-market processes. The one I'm a big fan of, because it replicates how a customer navigates the journey through your company and your product. So I recommend LB Cups, which is a very well-known framework. And what it does is, it essentially is like, forget about yourself, forget that you're different teams. You are one team delivering to the customer, and the customer is the most paramount thing in this cycle. The customer is right. The customer is always, you stop being reactive when you're proactive. How are you proactive? If all of you get together on a regular cadence and go through these tasks, right? So the way I design LB cups is when I go into organizations, I start going and delving into the details of each and every department's function. How do you function? How do you deliver this, right? So for example, let's say a customer learns about the product, which is the first stage of LB cups. How do they learn about the product? What do they learn about us? Who is the owner of that cycle? So I assign champions from each of those departments for those tasks. And simply when you start breaking down, so one thing what it does is you templatize it, you put it out, make it tailored. Don't follow a existing framework. Take it as a mindset, design your own, make it specific to your company. But the one thing you'll do is you'll all realize, one, you're all a cohesive unit. You all operate on different things. You start having more empathy for each other's work and each other's delivery. You start understanding, okay, this is what sales is doing, this is what revenue is doing. So you start breaking the silos, you exchange information. You're not exchanging everything, you're only exchanging relevant information, right? So that's where when I say like when product marketing and product management lead that process and essentially take the initiative to create those cross-functional processes and then getting people involved, get them all excited, get them there, and then discuss and debate and find out what you can do. And in my experience, it's been super effective. I've realized it's one of the fastest ways, especially because I work for small to mid-sized companies. It's been very effective way of decision making. Everybody feels they're part of the decision, which is always the greatest thing, impossible to achieve otherwise. Everybody has a single goal. There is only one single goal. They're all aligned with it. And you get different perspectives. Like, by the way, these meetings don't even take too long. This framework, once it's operational, you'll probably be dedicating 1 hour every 2 weeks and you're good to go. Your product launches, like you have your success metric, you understand that support goes in. So you don't have situations like, oh, I promised. If you promised, you'll see how that thing goes in. Maybe your client said, you know what, I'll pay you 100,000, whatever, for this enhancement, right? That's your main incentive as a sales guy or a CS guy. And you come in and you immediately look at it and you're like, well, this is going to cost us 200,000 to deliver because I have to involve a product manager, I have to involve a designer, I have to involve an engineer, I have to replace other things. Like those kind of evaluations are super helpful when you have a framework like that.
Thank you for sharing that framework. And I feel like that mindset of cross-functional collaboration is effective no matter what you do within a company, right? Because it's like, why would you not get real-time feedback from those who are actually doing the work so that you can actually have practical solutions to it? So as we slowly wrap up our conversation, one of my questions to you is, what does it take to unleash the potential of individuals or organizations?
Trust in people's potential, trust in people's capabilities, trust in people's skill. Every time I go in, I'm not a micromanager at all. I think when I hire people, one, I hire them on potential and fire, and then I train them and upskill them because I'm like, I'll make sure that you have every skill that you need to do your job right. I will always be the guiding light. I will mentor you, I will coach you, and I will make sure that you get the credit for it because obviously everybody likes winning. But yeah, trust is a really, really big factor, right? So even at my husband's restaurant, so I designed our HR practice or how we're going to recruit. And it's based on like, we know what we're looking for. The person might not have done this job ever, but if they have like, because we're like, what's our differentiator? Our differentiator is customer experience. Customer experience means you're hiring people who can provide that experience, which is like, hey, like, how do you talk? Like, we have a lot of kids who come in. It's like, oh, you should be able to be good with kids, right? You learn the job. We have a manual. We'll teach you everything. But it's like, yeah. And as I mentioned, in the recent market, I've seen there's an erosion of trust. We believe that people are not checklist and we're not checklist, so we're not going to hire these people. And I'm like, look at all our leadership journeys. We weren't those checklists either. Why would I put this restriction that didn't exist for me for incoming people? I want to make it easier, right? If somebody has the fire, I'm going to trust them to do their job. I'm not going to constantly be on the head and ask like, hey, what are you doing? And where's your output? From my side as a leader, I have to set the vision. I have to set the goals. I have to set goals that they can measure against, right? Set realistic goals. Obviously, set stretch goals. Because stretch goals is what gets the best out of people. Realistic goals is what they can achieve. So everybody has the mindset and then trust them to do it. Do regular check ins, find out what's blocking them. Like, talk to your own people, be communicative, be a part of their team, but also realize you're always their leader. So, yeah, leadership is all about trust.
We need more leaders like you, right? Especially when companies are like, I can't hire someone, and you're like, there's an entire market of unemployed individuals looking for work right now. It's not a candidate issue. It's a person in the mirror type of conversation that you might want to have, right? So
Yeah.
my last question to you is, what is one thing that you're working on right now that you're very excited about?
So I'm very excited about all the collaboration I'm doing around responsible AI. I'm actually very excited because honestly, I think it's taken me 15 years to realize what I was really, really passionate about. And I felt like I had a true calling in it. So, yes, connecting the dots, putting out raising awareness about what are these existing bias, how can it happen, how do we make sure in the future that doesn't happen, right? So I'm very excited about defining the responsible AI framework, where I'm also designing a product management workflow, a completely different way of doing product, which aligns with this. Technology moves fast, but some things are constant, and how do we get it? And yeah, that'll come in the next few months because I'm still in the works for it. But yeah, I think I'm super excited about it. How do we all get ethical? Let's go all get ethical. Let's start doing things for the good. I was recently watching Tokyo Vice. If you haven't watched it, it's a really good show. And one thing that struck me in a recent episode was basically they had a quote saying there should be more people who work for people. If there are more people who work for more people, things get better. And as technology people, we need to realize that we've been working for ourselves. We need to realize we are working for a bigger community. We need to understand we are here to make things better for everybody, right? So let's be more people who work for other people.
Really great call out. And you know what? I love that you have your newsletter called Curious Gen out, and that's a resource that people can lean on. And for you, maybe what's one or two resources that you are like, hey, this is a credible resources that I'm leaning on for information related to generative AI, LLM, ethics, all that golden nuggets.
So I would say there are two courses in deep learning that I actually really like from Deep Learning Institute. Andrew Ng is pretty much the god of how we look at AI. And he has a very philosophical way of talking about things. I would recommend those courses. They're hard. They also need you to have not expertise, but advanced skills in Python, especially the second one where you start fine tuning. But definitely start with that course. And I've been telling everybody, go read these research papers. I know they're not the most attractive literature, but go read them. They're going to change the world. Literally, the other source I say is go to Hugging Face. It's an open source resource for all LLM models. Go read through their model cards. Every model card links into a research paper. Go read that research paper. Go connect with people because that's what I'm doing. I'm like, hey, I want to see what this group is doing. I find out the people. I'm like, I want to connect to them. I want to learn more about it, right? So go learn. There are lots of research. I would say steer clear of anything which is generic because there's a lot of generic stuff. The way you get through it is you go through the difficult, for example, read the EU regulation. I summarized it, but it's a long text. But yeah, read stuff like that, which is more specialized because all the nuggets lie in those specialized material. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing those resources with us. And thank you for sharing your passion and your insights. Like I said, it is absolutely contagious and it's such important information to keep top of mind. And to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know. And I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.